I was hooked.
Let's make a little tweak.
You didn't see what I dumped out.
This is terrible.
All right, well, you get the plastic ones next.
Someone said that to you.
We're not going to tell you what these are.
I am out.
Like, no, don't change it at all.
No.
That's totally fair.
Actually,
And she's just looking at me like I'm an idiot.
you're listening to The Hot Sauce Show, the place to meet hot sauce makers and enthusiasts. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, welcome to The Hot Sauce Show. My name is Zack. Today we have Danny Hudson from Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. We're really excited to chat. Danny, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I'm glad that you guys were able to have me.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I like to jump just right into it. What inspired you to make hot sauce?
So actually the way it worked out was during COVID, right? Everybody had a bunch of stuff going on. I got a phone call from my boss, and he was like, so, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat? So I was fortunate enough to graduate back in college back in 2007. So my first couple of jobs, I got laid off because of economic conditions and that kind of thing. And so I'm like, okay, I've been a part of these conversations before. So I know how this, goes. And then he brought his boss onto the phone as well. And yeah, exactly. But the first thing he says is, no, don't worry. And I was like, well, yeah, but you know what this conversation's about, and I don't.
Sure.
So they did some restructuring, and that kind of thing, and he wanted to keep me on the team. But after I got off the phone, I was talking with my wife, and I'm like, that totally could have gone the other way.
Sure.
And we were a one-income household. And so we were like, okay, well, we have to start coming up. But what else do we want to do? A good friend of mine made hot sauce, and I've worked in corporate finance for a long time, and so we were originally partners.
Oh, okay.
So I called him, and I was like, hey, let's get together. This is something that I've been interested in doing. Let's brainstorm some ideas and that kind of thing. And so we got together, we did some sampling, and I love to cook, and I love the creativity that goes into hot sauce production and that kind of thing. So I was hooked right away. He ended up having to back out, and so my wife was like, well, do you want to quit? And I go, well, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. And so that basically made it a two-person team, me and her. That was about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And since then, I've made hundreds of batches of hot sauce, dozens and dozens of different flavors, had to dump out a few because trial and error.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
But that's really, how we got going, and it's been a passion ever since.
That's wonderful. So talk to me about, you talk to a lot of makers and they say, well, I start with the artwork or I start with the name. And then some say, well, I want to do, a Reaper sauce. Like
Sure.
you have a fantastic line now. Where's your starting point on a new, like if you had to make a new sauce, you're going to go home today, where do you start?
Sure. The first place we would start is an idea of something to work with, right? So for example, we've been discussing datil peppers, right? And so we think, okay, well, here's what is currently in the lineup, right? Here's what we've got.
Your lineup.
In the current lineup that we make, correct. Okay. What's different? What can we do with something that's different, that's not already something that we produce, right? Or something that's close. And so, for example, we would not make another pineapple sauce, right? Or we wouldn't make another mustard-based sauce.
So pepper's unique, but let's also make the flavor profile unique.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a double uniqueness.
Exactly. In that way, too, what ends up happening is right, we don't end up having a situation where everyone's like, well, I would eat this, but it's almost the same as this, you know, and the goal is to try to keep as many SKUs limited as much as possible. We don't want to have 30 different sauces out there, especially when it's just us two.
Sure.
It's hard to manage, something along those lines. And what it also allows us to do is if something's not being as warm receptive as we would like, okay, well, let's phase that one out, and then we'll phase a new sauce in. It keeps the lineup fresh and that kind of thing. So generally, we'll start with a specific ingredient, figure out how we can make it different than what we currently have in the lineup, and then we kind of start doing some research on other flavors that really kind of complement that. And so, for example, the pineapple, I wanted to char the pineapple. It gives it kind of an additional depth of flavor to it, and tweak it and make it different than how a lot of other pineapple sauces might end up playing out. And that's also part of the reason why we paired it up with cinnamon, right? The chariness of the pineapple, take away a little bit of the sweetness, add some chariness from the cooking of the pineapple, and then the cinnamon that kind of complements it. So start with the ingredient that we want, and think about how it would be different than what we currently offer, and then really build the flavor profile based off
around
of
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
After talking to a lot of people, it seems like the holy grail seems to be exactly what you said, where we have pineapple that people are familiar with.
Right.
You know, everyone or mostly everyone knows what a pineapple is, pineapple in a sauce. So let's get something that is familiar. Let's make a little tweak to make it novel.
Right.
Like the charring.
Yes.
So people are like, I know pineapple, and then it's like the charred, and I think that's perfect.
Right.
I love it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Here we go.
So this is your pineapple habanero?
Yeah, so we also do some quarterly seasonal sauces. This one actually started as a seasonal sauce that we did for the summer in 2022. And then at the end of the year, what we end up doing is, cheers.
Cheers.
And so,
Love that.
Thank you. And so at the end of the year, we send out an email to all of our customers to basically say, hey, what did we do well this year? What did you guys like? Exactly. It's a survey. And then one of the things we also like to do is we say, out of all the seasonal sauces, which ones did you guys like the most? And which ones would you guys, if interested, roll into the normal lineup?
Interesting.
And so this one actually ended up being one of those sauces where people are like, hey, we want it available all year round.
Now, it was a fall?
It was a summer.
It was a summer. Okay.
Summer, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. I taste the smokiness. There's some chunks in there. What else is in there? So the cinnamon is kind of a highlighted ingredient.
Yep.
And then the peppers.
Yep, the habanero, it's a habanero pepper base.
Okay.
You know, and one of the other things too that we attempt to try to do is we try to keep the ingredient list simple. And part of it is because there are specific flavors that we really want to highlight and we don't want those to get muddied. And so that's one of the reasons why we really wanted to make the pineapple the star.
Yeah.
And then kind of what really is able to complement that.
Yeah.
And then obviously the habanero heat that's in there.
Because you get kind of the smokiness first, and then the pineapple, and then the cinnamon comes at the end.
Right.
And it's almost like, it reminds me of almost like applesauce, but spicy, because it's got this fruity flavor
Right.
and kind of this chunky texture. I think that's just fantastic for, putting on. What's your favorite thing to put that on?
So we actually, the recipe that we made for it that we used as our highlighted summer recipe was chicken and waffles. And so when we actually marinate the chicken in the buttermilk, we'll include some of that in the marinade. And then obviously fry it up and then use it as a topping on there as
On
well.
top.
Yeah, 100%.
That sounds phenomenal.
And a lot of grilled chickens. Anything that you're kind of cooking. And that was part of the reason why we wanted to make it a summer sauce, because it's ideal for, grilling and having people over and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, excuse me one second here.
Yeah.
So back to the kind of the process of it. How do you find yourself balancing the flavor and heat? There's a big push in the industry right now. I mean, there's always, let's make things as hot as we can, but then there's kind of a cap to that. A lot of sauce makers like yourself have a really flavor-driven hot sauce lineup. How do you find yourself balancing that? Because I know being a creator, a maker, your tolerance is generally a lot higher. So what do you do to kind of make sure, I mean, you have your customer list and things like that. What do you do to make sure your flavor and your heat are kind of in check with one another?
Sure. Part of it helps that I don't have the tolerance.
Oh, okay.
I think for like so for example, with Pepper X, right? Recently, I will probably never eat a Pepper X,
Right.
Right.
There's a whole crowd for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love it. I love the fact that the creativity is there and new stuff that's always coming out. It really brings a highlight to the industry as a whole.
Yes.
Which is super awesome. For us, it's more along the lines of, what are the flavor profiles, the heat levels that we're able to do and able to tolerate, because I think we're probably more of the standard just in terms of heat. And also, too, the peppers that I like to have ones and use ones that are going to also have some flavor amongst themselves, too. Not necessarily just something that's there to add heat, which is part of the reason why currently in our lineup, half of them are habaneros. Like half of our sauces are habaneros.
Right.
It's a very easy to work with pepper. It's very flexible. You can do a lot with it, and also has a great flavor.
Yeah.
And so normally we'll start there. And part of it also, too, ends up being trial and error. So, for example, we'll make a new sauce that's using a specific type of pepper, and I'm like, well, let's put this amount in there. We make it, all right, well, it's too hot, right? Tone it down a little bit. Maybe the ratios need to be adjusted. Because again, one of the benefits of it being your own company If it doesn't meet what you're looking for, you just scrap it.
Yeah.
You know, and
you
can
still
start
have
over.
it in a notebook.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
maybe one day we come back to that, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're able to tweak it and adjust your ratios based on what you're looking for. And then we're also very fortunate that we have a very good dedicated subscriber base of ours that we send out test sauces to. So for example, you know, we'll send out sauces with a survey that just says, hey, here's 3, you know, we're not going to tell you what these are. Let us know what you guys think.
And how many people do you think you send that to?
We'll send them out to anywhere from like 15 to 30.
Oh, okay. So pretty small sample size,
small
but your
sample
loyal
size.
customers and people that know
Correct.
your sauce lineup.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we live in a neighborhood too that people now know us as the
Yeah.
hot sauce people.
That's great.
And so we'll get Facebook messages, hey, you guys working on anything new? And since
Not looking for a free sauce or anything, but
right, exactly.
I am out.
Exactly. And you remember who you give the glass bottles to and you don't get them back from, and
Right.
you go, all right, well, you get the plastic ones next time.
Right,
you know,
right,
that
right,
kind
right.
of thing. And so we'll also have them out there in the market as well, just to get additional feedback
Sure.
from us. Because again, when we originally made the pineapple, I was actually thinking that we were too heavy on the cinnamon. And then the response came back and people were like, no, don't change it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'm just one person and you guys are a lot more.
Right.
So
You're buying it, not me.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, exactly. And so that's usually where we'll start with it. And again, because our heat tolerance isn't super high, the goal isn't to, you know, make something that is going to be, you know, no one's going to have to sign a waiver,
Sure.
you know, to eat any of it. And so when we just stop with that as the premise, trying to find that nice balance between the flavors becomes a lot easier.
And you end up finding a lot more people that are amicable to trying hot sauce when they realize it's not, you know, it's like one spouse likes hot sauce.
Sure.
One spouse doesn't. And they're like, hey, give this a shot. And
Right.
they go, you know, they use that word actually.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
oh, this actually isn't bad. And you're like, well, did you think it was going to be bad?
Right,
Like, no,
right,
that's not what I meant.
right.
You know, it's not spicy. Oh, okay. But yeah, it really kind of broadens that. So this is kind of granular, but
Sure.
I'm always curious. So you have 30-ish people you give these samples to. How do you get feedback from them in a way that, you know, they're not going to be biased because you're the one that made it? You know, oh, it's wonderful, but it's hot. Or like, do they just tell you in person, or do they have a little survey they fill out? Or how do you keep that, like, let them speak freely? Because as much as you say, like, oh, tell me exactly what you think,
Sure.
they're not going to be able to tell you this is terrible.
Right.
Right.
So we'll generally send out several versions. And so at minimum, they're going to rank them, right?
Oh, okay, that's
and
great.
so, hey, here's the one I like the most. Here's the middle one. Here's the last
That
one.
forces them to
Correct.
make an answer.
Exactly. And
love that.
we'll say, hey, what did you like about it? What did you not like about it? And then at the end, you know, they'll rank them. And then it's like, okay, well, if this was one of our normal sauces, would you include that in your subscription? Or if you saw this in a store, is it something that you would buy?
So very consumer-oriented questions. Not so much, hey, do you think this is too much habanero in it? Or do you
Correct.
think that's fantastic?
Yeah, and because at the end of the day, right, like my mom is my biggest fan.
That's
she's
wonderful,
Never,
yeah.
She's never going to say anything was bad.
Sure.
So
Well, hun, Danny, yeah, it was fine.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. If I were you, you know, maybe, you know, something, but it's great. You know, I like it. And I'm like, Mom, that's not helpful.
Yeah, right.
You know, exactly. And so, and we also try to stress that, hey, you know, the reason why we're making these as much as you guys like them and as good as they are, your feedback is what's helping to drive that. And so
Sure.
if you guys don't give us honest feedback, it's not actually going to help us make,
Right.
you know, a sauce as good as it could be.
Because by the time you give it to them, and not to be full of yourself, but by the time you give it to them, it's already pretty good. So, you know, I don't need you to say, oh, yeah, it's really good. You're like, I kind of know that.
Right.
You know, you don't want to say it to them.
Yeah.
You're like, I know that because I had 50 revisions before I put it in your hand.
Right. You didn't see what I dumped out.
Right,
You know?
right, exactly. So, can you give me kind of like, you know, that's really good.
100%.
So, do you do markets and shows and what do you do right now to kind of get the word out?
Yeah. So I mean, we have some partnerships and stuff, and partners like you are super helpful as far as getting those out there. You know, I still do have my Monday to Friday job.
Yep.
And so you know, we don't typically tend to do a lot of farmers markets and and things along those lines, which those are obviously always helpful. You know, but just having, you know, working Monday to Friday, plus having to go into the kitchen to make stuff, you know, doing a market on Saturday it's just not always in the cards.
Right.
I mean, it's awesome for feedback, you know, and I know a lot of people really depend on those, and it's super great. It's just the schedule and stuff doesn't end up working. We do end up getting to do some events. So, for example, in Nashville, there's a lot of beer festivals and things. Cool. And so normally those types of events that are out in the community, we try to get involved in. I try to do like one a quarter if possible. If it's something, especially if it's close by, I'll try to get out there more. If for no other reason, the fact that the market feedback and the market research is great.
You get that 100 people came, obviously you want them to buy it.
Right.
But if nothing else, you get 100 strangers that tried it, and you know, you see their face that split second when they tried it before they can think about their answer. Right. That gives you kind of a nod of, oh, maybe this is too acidic or too hot or something like that. Yeah. And so is there any kind of playing into that? Is there any story you have that someone that tried a sauce that said something that was like unexpected or kind of like opened your mind up to other sauces or ideas?
One of the things that I love about doing the in-person events is the fact that people always have expectations kind of going into what they're going to have. And so, you know, you've got the board with everything listed, right? And it's A, B, C, D, you know, that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, well, what do you want to try? And there was one lady that was, you know, specifically, and she came up and she was like, well, I want to try this. And then she was like, oh my gosh, you know, I really like that. She ended up trying everything, which is always great, you know, because people always want to, you know, that's a great piece of feedback and great support. And then she ended up buying, you know, a handful of sauces. And so I was like, yeah, you know, was everything kind of what you were expecting? And she's like, no, they weren't. These were the sauces that and just by the names that I was expecting that I was going to end up enjoying. And I actually went with ones that weren't even on my radar, you know, at the time.
Yeah.
And so having valuable feedback and stuff like that, and really kind of helping people to think outside of, you know, what they normally like or something along those lines was super great. We also have a handful of customers too that are kind of on the flip side where they know exactly what they want. You know, so when we send out our quarterly boxes, we have a handful of people that they only have one sauce in it. So we have several that they can choose from and they can rotate or whatever. That's the only one that they want.
Well, you guys are crushing this.
Yeah, I know.
Like, that's a lot of sauce to eat in a couple months.
Yeah, I mean, so they'll get 3 bottles of the same one, and I'll even email them and reach out and say, hey, you haven't had this one before. Is it, you know, would you want? And they go, nope, this is the one that I want. And those are the ones too where it's great knowing the feeling that when you send out that type of sauce to people and they send you the emails back and they say, we went through an entire bottle of it in a meal, right? We had some friends over.
My friends stole it.
Exactly. Yeah. I left it at a friend's house and I actually had to drive back, you know, because I left it there, you know, that kind of thing. And so, you know, anytime that we get any kind of feedback and in instances like that, it's always a super satisfying feeling knowing that you're creating that kind of a value to somebody where, you know, out of all the hot sauces in the world, and even from our lineup to choose from, they like that one so much that that's the only one that they wanted to go with.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. So you're in Nashville, right? Is that right? So everyone knows country music and horses and everything else. Is there any regional influence to Nashville or kind of that part of the country that you've incorporated with your hot sauces, or does that play into anything you do, or is it kind of like, no?
Yes. I mean, obviously Tennessee Hot Sauce Company, you know, it was named after it. Our logo was actually designed after the Tri-Star flag, which is the state flag of Tennessee.
Cool. And do you know the history behind that? Or?
Yeah, so the Tri-Star flag is essentially set up between the 3 regions of Tennessee. So there's West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and East Tennessee. Okay. And so that's the 3 stars that make up the Tri-Star flag.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and so we were like, you know, and if you go to Tennessee, you'll see a lot of people walking around with Tennessee branded stuff, right?
Proud people.
Yeah. Just, you know, it's maybe not to the same scale as Texas.
Yeah.
You know,
we know you're the biggest in the lower 48.
Yeah, exactly. I know the Lone Star. We got it. All right. So we were just like, well, we want to use that. You know, it's got the immediate brand recognition. It's in the name, you know, and we really wanted to kind of use that as an influence in that regard. But then there's also some other seasonal, or not necessarily seasonal, but flavor influences that we use. So, for example, at Biketoberfest, we debuted a sauce. We partnered with Sons of Speed, who they race like antique motorcycles.
Oh, nice.
And so they were founded in Melbourne, Florida. They're headquartered out of Florida, and so we really wanted to make kind of a Florida influence sauce, that really kind of that went in with the mold of the Florida theme. The owner, Billy Lane, is originally from South Florida. It's a very big part of his, of who he is. And so we literally just were like, hey, what works for Florida? And so in it, there's papaya. We also have the agave in there. We use the Scotch bonnets as far as the pepper, and there's some cilantro, there's mint in there. And so we really wanted to say, hey, if you're eating this sauce, what is it reminding you of? And the goal of that one is we want people to think about, Florida as a whole. And so that one we were really proud of. And if the situation fits, we'll work it in there. But we also don't want to try to force it.
Right.
So we made a barbecue sauce that was a Memphis style barbecue sauce.
And help our viewers, what makes Memphis barbecue sauce, what makes it Memphis barbecue sauce?
Sure. So we wanted to make sure that we included the molasses. There was molasses in there.
There was more of sweet.
Yeah, and then obviously we used smoked ghost peppers too, and so it had a smoky ghost pepper flavor, profile to it. And part of the reasons why I love being in business with my wife is because when I was originally researching the barbecue, and I was like, well, what type of barbecue sauce should we do? And she's just looking at me like I'm an idiot, and I'm like, what? And she goes, it's literally, the name is Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. Like, why wouldn't you make a Tennessee style barbecue sauce? And I'm like, I don't even know why I'm even thinking about this.
It. Yeah, you're so dialed into it. You're like overthinking about what it actually is.
I'm like, Kansas City, like maybe like an Alabama. And she's like, no, it's Tennessee. And I go, nope, that's totally fair.
You're like Chattanooga barbecue sauce. No, it doesn't sound quite right. Oh, Memphis.
Yeah. One of like the best types of, barbecue places in the country.
Yeah.
And so we try not to force it. But if it has a really natural fit, then we definitely want to go with that.
I love that. Well, what's the second? Tell us about the second sauce you brought today.
Sure. So this one is the blood orange ghost pepper sauce. And so I'm a fan of blood oranges. I like the fact that they have some sweet, but they also have some tartness to them as well. There we go. So kind of like what you talked about before, as far as the inspiration behind it. This one, obviously, we wanted to start with the blood oranges, but I didn't want to make something that was too sweet. And so what we actually ended up doing was we ended up kind of pairing. Cheers. What we ended up doing with this one is we paired it up with tomato. And so that way you get the sweet and the tart from the blood oranges, but you also get the acidity from the tomatoes to kind of help balance it out.
Yeah.
And then we made sure, too, that we increased the salt content in there, too, to kind of help play off of the acidity from the tomatoes. So we wanted to make sure we really got a well-balanced sauce that had some meat to it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't overly sweet with the blood orange. It wasn't overly tart. And then obviously too, having some of that tomato flavor that's in there as well.
Yeah, that's really, really fantastic. So this goes into perfectly my next question. With a unique ingredient like the blood orange, how does that and just everything in general play into any difficulties or challenges you have with scaling your production as you grow?
Sure. This one is not necessarily too bad in terms of scaling because the ingredients are relatively straightforward. And so they're not super exotic, right? Like we're not using saffron, something that's super difficult to find. We're using ghost peppers, and so it's not super difficult to get a hold of. So the ingredients are still relatively straightforward and simple. The production for it is fairly straightforward, especially once you get your ratios and things dialed in. Where we have found some of the issues in terms of potential scaling roadblocks, we do like to do a lot of unique things for some of our sauces. So like, for example, when we were talking about the pineapple, we char ingredients.
So you do all the charring yourself?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we also try to use as many fresh ingredients as possible too. And so as we're having discussions about scaling, not everybody is always necessarily willing to work with as many fresh ingredients as we use, or they're not willing to go through extra steps in terms of charring ingredients. So those have kind of become issues in terms of scalability. But again, because it's my wife and I at this point that are kind of running everything, we had to make the decision do we want to adjust the recipes and the formulas, to make it easier to scale, or do we want to kind of retain the current flavor profiles and the quality of it and keep it at a smaller scale? And so currently that's where we are. Realistically, what'll probably end up happening in terms of that is that the ones that are able to be scaled, we will probably try to help those to be able to continue to scale, whereas the ones that don't will probably continue to produce those. Correct.
And then you can keep those as like a seasonal deal or
Correct.
limited time.
Right.
And then,
right.
and then have more to a bigger scale.
Which it actually works okay on our part, because if, like right now we have 6 sauces that are in the lineup. If we only have to make 3 of them regularly, at least we're able to focus those production times more around those 3 sauces rather than the full lineup. And so, but again, like most businesses, scaling is always a challenge. It's like, the notorious B.I.G. used to say, right? More money, more problems,
Yep.
And that kind of thing. And so, the bigger you get.
I just sold a lot. Well, now I got to make a lot.
Right, exactly.
And then I got to sell what I made because I made more than,
Right. That kind of thing. And so, now though that we're further into it, it's easier for us to say, well, what's your minimum requirement? And they say, well, it's 40 gallons. Okay, well, 2 years ago, we would have been like, oh my, what are we ever going to do with 850 bottles?
So 40 gallons is 800 and change?
800 and change. Correct.
Okay.
Right. And so now it's like, okay, well, that's great because that means we won't have to make any sauce for a couple of months,
right?
Or something along those lines. So making sure that you keep that in perspective and you approach the challenges realistically and logically, it helps us to not kind of get overwhelmed in that regard. And again, worst case scenarios, I can continue to keep making it, if we needed to.
Right. So where do you kind of see yourself going more the e-commerce route or grocery stores or like where do you kind of envision you headed with the company?
Sure. I most likely it would probably be more of the e-commerce route. One of the benefits that we have working in a cooperative kitchen where a lot of other businesses also operate, is that you get to talk, with a lot of those businesses. You realize, from having conversations with them, where are their bottlenecks in terms of their business operations and things like that. And one of the big ones is staffing, right? And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody right now. People are having issues in terms of staffing and things along those lines. If we were to scale, and we're in grocery stores or things along those lines, if we had 2 or 3 employees and we're on vacation and they're sick, or something is going on, right?
Even if you're not even making it,
right.
just to have it land and distribute it out.
Exactly. 100%, and so now you're in a lot of trouble, in that regard. And so because we enjoy doing it and it's a big passion project, I think our plan has kind of been, okay, well, what can we manage, right? Grow a little bit more. Okay, are we still able to manage this?
Yeah.
And it would be great being able to walk into a Publix or a grocery store or that kind of thing and see your sauce on the shelf.
Yeah.
But seeing it there doesn't always mean that you understand how it got there.
Right. Yeah, you're not going in with your hand truck and,
right.
Hey, can I put these up? And, there are some small stores where you can do that. You come in and, hey, I'm Danny. This is our hot sauce. We make it right around the corner
Correct.
Here. And they're like, oh, yeah, we love that.
Yes.
That's 5 stores you can do that with?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so we, and again, too, like when people reach out and they're like, hey, we would love to have your sauces in our store. And one of the first questions is, well, what's the type of volume that you guys are looking for? Because we want to be able to make sure that we can manage it. And that way they have a good experience. We have a good experience. And it's something that we can kind of roll in and keep it going. And so, maybe one day we'll get there, especially as like our boys get older. And if that's something that maybe they'd be interested in doing, then they can look at going that route. But it's also nice knowing that if we wanted to, we potentially could, right? That the response has been positive enough, and our community is so supportive, in that regard to where if we were to wake up one day and go, okay, let's do it, that we could.
Yeah, no, I love that. So you brought up a good point. So my wife and I, our kids, they're really into the hot sauce thing. And our little one, he's 6 now. He used to think black pepper was spicy. He still sometimes does. And
Right.
We're like, how do you think this is spicy if you're eating
right.
super hots with your sister. Like
Exactly.
it's the goofiest thing. Are your boy? You said 2 boys. Are they into the hot sauce stuff now with eating it?
The older one tries,
Okay.
and so he's building it up, right?
Yeah.
So he likes to put hot sauce in a lot of stuff, but he likes the milder ones.
Does he use yours?
Yes. And also too, there's another brand too that's actually his favorite. That's not ours.
You're like, okay, not taking that personally, but
I know.
throw it in the trash.
Right. And so he's like, well, when are we gonna have some more of that? And I was like, well, I'll get some soon.
Look, Daddy and Mommy just worked a long time, and we have thousands of these bottles we need
exactly. I think this one is actually your favorite. And he's like, well, I don't know, but no, it is. I'm telling you that this one is your favorite.
That's great.
The little one is not as much, but
and how old is he?
He's 3.
3. Okay.
And so we're we were talking about that earlier, where at least he's at that stage where he actually likes vegetables, and so we're like, no, we're not pushing anything else.
Don't interfere with that.
Right. We start adding more stuff to it, and the next thing we know, you're reverting back to chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, and we've lost all of the progress.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
The fun thing about him though is he also likes to help out as far as like the packaging and and that stuff. So we'll get some orders, and I'm putting orders together, and he's like, oh, I want to help, and so I'm like, okay, well, I mean, of course, his helping slows you down, but it's awesome that he wants to help, and so you're like, okay, we'll put this bottle here and put this bottle here, and so you kind of let him do that part. And so if anything, I could probably see it where the older one may actually get more involved on the production side, that kind of thing. And then the younger one may end up doing something more as far as the actual business and distribution, and that kind of thing. So, or they may say, we want no part of this whatsoever when they get older.
Right.
Which is
that's y'all's thing. It'll be really helpful now. They'll become teenagers, and it's like,
exactly,
we want nothing to do with them. And then by the time they're like 19, 20, oh yeah, mom and dad kind of had it figured out. And they're like, well, we didn't, but
right. Do you guys want to start doing this some more now and helping us out?
Right,
and
exactly.
that kind of thing. But
so getting back to, we talked about the pineapple and how the pineapple, everyone has a pineapple, then charring is making kind of novel. What other things, and I think that's fantastic, what else do you work on to kind of position yourself with competition to, I'll say, I guess the easiest way to say it is to kind of separate yourself from competition. And, I'm sure when you are meeting the public and doing the limited shows that you do, like how do you kind of envision yourself? Because, a lot of times you get into business really for anything, it's like there's competitors for everything.
Sure.
If you're starting a business with no competitors, then maybe you're a genius or maybe you're not. I don't know. But they say, don't bother doing something, or maybe this is just my saying, don't bother doing something unless you're going to be better or different.
Right.
So I know you got the better thing because your sauces are fantastic. But,
Thank you.
But how do you kind of, in your headspace, where do you differentiate and kind of make your stuff better to compete with competitors?
No, I mean, it's a great question, because as I'm sure probably a lot of the people that are watching, hot sauces, the industry as a whole is kind of in a bit of a boom right now.
Kind of like where microbrews were 20 years ago.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%. And I make that comparison a lot. Because one of the other things too that I found as far as the hot sauce industry is very similar to the microbrew industry, is that at least again from my own perspective, I see the demand at this point is still kind of outpacing the supply. And so if people that are getting into the space, if they're making a quality product, they'll find a buyer. They'll find somebody that's able to buy it. And it also makes the industry as a whole much more friendly, right? I mean, there's a couple of other hot sauce folks that are in the Nashville area that if they didn't help me out, when we were first getting started, we may not even be here.
I love to hear that.
Yeah,
it's almost like competitors, but kind of like colleagues. Because it's kind of a lonely world. It's like a lonely world, but not a lonely world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you take some stuff out there, and as as a business owner getting stuff off the ground, there's an initial investment that goes into it. And so, when I take some sauces out there to let them try, and I go, hey, can you guys just let me know? I think these are good. What do you guys think? Because if you think that they're all terrible, then maybe this isn't the right thing for me to do. And before I dump thousands and thousands of dollars in time and that kind of thing. And so that was a big thing. I don't really typically tend to see them much in terms of competitors,
right.
And that, because I think there is currently, the pie I think is big enough and it's still growing for everybody. In terms of differentiation though, and that's really kind of where we go, because again, like you said before, there's super hots, right? And people where, they don't necessarily have to make a sauce that's better, but if it's hotter, it'll sell, right? And you know,
Hot as this, hot as that.
exactly, you know, and so those will go because of the novelty aspect of it. And so one of the things that we try to do, especially when it comes to recipes and coming up with ingredients, is we start with a kind of a concept like we talked about earlier, and then we kind of build it out, and then we think, okay, well, is there anything out there that's pretty similar to this? And if there's some that are kind of similar, when we'll say, okay, well, is ours different enough to where it really ends up making that big of a difference? Because if we end up making a sauce, for example, one of our bigger sellers is our garlic sauce. I mean, garlic is
garlic.
I mean, it's everybody has a garlic, you know, and that kind of thing. And so, you know, how do we differentiate that one from the other ones? And if we're able to do so, then we'll say, hey, that sounds like a great idea, you know, and then we'll kind of go from there, and we'll look at the ingredient list. And like I said, we try to keep it simple as well. And so we also find that a lot of people really like and they appreciate the fact that, you know, they can read the ingredient list. There's not a ton of ingredients in there. It's not not full of additional things that go into it. And so that's really where we go to try to keep it simple, try to keep the flavors vibrant and bright, and really focus on several of the flavors and how they kind of marry together to make a great sauce.
Yeah, I think bright is a great word that I never thought of for your sauces, but I think describes them perfectly.
Thank you.
Is that you just have this bright flavor, there's heat, but there's flavor there. I mean, they're fantastic. What's the last one you have here for us?
So this one is our mustard. This one's a mustard dill scorpion. There we go. And this one is one of our newer sauces that we have in the lineup. There we go. And so kind of like how I mentioned to you before, where we have our subscribers and our base of people that we'll send out sauces to. This sauce was actually crowdsourced by our subscribers. So cheers. And so one of the big pieces of feedback, thank you. One of the big pieces of feedback that we got from...
So not an original sauce.
Correct.
New, so this was, you sent it out as samples.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so one of the big pieces of feedback that we got from our customers was that they wanted something that was a little bit hotter, because at the time the Blood Orange Ghost was the hottest one that we had. And so we were like, okay, we didn't want to go the full Reaper route. Again, the goal was also to try to make them table sauces where, you know, if you had something, you could put it on there, and it made sense on a lot of different dishes. And so we decided to go for a scorpion sauce. And so we sent out 3 very different scorpion sauces to about 30 different people with a survey.
And what were the differences?
So we had this one, and another one was an avocado-based sauce.
Okay.
And then another one was a beet and cucumber-based sauce. So I may have just told you some sauces that we may be trying out again.
Dropping hints here.
Yeah, I know.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. And then this one was the third one. And so originally, though, in the recipe, instead of using dill pickles, which is what's actually in there, we used dill the herb. And so, you know, we ended up
Which
having...
is a pickling ingredient.
Correct.
But not pickled.
Correct, exactly. And so one of the pieces of feedback that we got from several different subscribers was they were like, this one's my favorite. But what if you tweaked it a little bit? Say, for example, if you used pickles instead of dill or something along those lines.
Someone said that to you.
Yes. Yeah. And several people. Like we had 3.
That's when you start getting the multiple that, like, they don't know each other. And
Correct.
That's the
100%.
best. Yeah.
And so literally we got those back, and I showed my wife, and I was like, we've had multiple people that have provided some feedback here. Let's try it. And so as soon as we did, we're like, that's the one. That's how we wanted to. That was what the goal of this sauce was. And we were able to kind of take the community feedback and stuff and roll that in and make that sauce. And then obviously it has the smoked paprika and stuff like that in there. But again, we wanted to keep the ingredient list relatively short, but that sauce wouldn't exist if it wasn't, for those people. And so we try to make sure that we remind them regularly and just say, hey, look, guys, we wouldn't be here we wouldn't be having these types of successes and this type of thing if you guys weren't continually so supportive and giving us that type of feedback. So I mean, I give that one actually ended up winning an award last year, and so we sent out essentially it was a thank you to all of our people and just say, hey, look, like the sauce that ended up winning an award, you guys are the ones that help us come up with it.
Yeah,
You
and they
know?
love that. And then you have like super cheerleaders.
Yes.
Because they're like, well, he sent out 3 and I gave him a few suggestions and look what you can buy at the grocery store now.
Exactly. I'm not getting any royalties, but I mean, I was able to provide some
and
good
they
feedback.
just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and that's
Right.
that's really good.
Right. Yeah.
That one I love. That one I like on a hot dog. It's almost like a really hot relish.
Yes.
Because it's got a texture to it and the dill flavor.
Right.
And it kind of short circuits like, oh, you don't even need to eat the pickle. It's all right here and it's hot. Yeah, that one is that's really, really fantastic.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I know in this part of the country we have Publix, which is very famous for their subs, their sandwiches. That's what I throw in all my Publix sandwiches and all that kind of stuff too. So
that's amazing. Well, cool. So we have a lot of viewers that are hot sauce makers, enthusiasts, and everyone else.
Sure.
So one thing I always like to ask is if someone wants to get into making hot sauce or thinks they want to get into making hot sauce, what advice do you have for them that could be do this, don't do that, and just anything that comes to mind if you had to start over tomorrow, but you know what you know.
Sure. The first one is be creative and have fun with it. One of the advantages that you do have is that it's not super expensive to make hot sauce on a small scale, right, in your kitchen. And so, if you think, hey, this combination of ingredients might be great, this might work, this sounds good, make it. Because, I mean, worst case scenario is if it doesn't, you can dump it out and you can go back. Because it's supposed to be fun. I mean, everybody no one takes it too seriously, right? So be creative and have some fun with it. One of the ingredients, I know we were talking earlier about the sourcing of the scorpion was beets. I'm not a huge beet fan, but I absolutely love the color of them. They make a beautiful colored sauce. But they're also very difficult to work with. They're very earthy and they're heavy. And I've dumped out more samples of beet sauce recipes than I have actually made beet sauces. But it's fun, and the color of them looks great, and they're
bright red.
Yeah, it's a beautiful color. And so it's like I will make a good beet sauce because I love the way it looks, and the texture of them are good, but they're very unforgiving.
And what about them? Is it the over earthiness of it? So do you basically will blend it and then add it in, or how do you?
So I'll usually end up cooking it, right, to try to soften it up a little bit, but you have to have the ratio of it. Like you might go to make a sample batch and go, well, I think maybe a pound of beets is great. Maybe I'll start with a pound of beets. And what the final product may end up being is like a quarter pound. Because it ends up just overwhelming everything else. The sauce ends up being thicker, than you were expecting. It's just the texture isn't quite where you want it to be, or things along those lines, which makes habaneros so great because habaneros are very flexible. They're easy to work with. The heat level is good enough to where you can scale it and you can have more, you can have less, and it all kinds of, kind of works.
Yep.
Whereas beets are not,
you gotta get it just right.
Right. You have to get it just right. But that's part of the fun of it, right? And that's the biggest piece of advice that I would suggest to people is just have fun with it, be creative, because small batch sauce that you make in your house, especially if it tastes good, it's a good feeling, and when you get people that come over to your house and you're like, hey, try this, I made it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, there's a good satisfaction that's in there, and I think a lot of people end up starting off because they made their own, and then their neighbors want some and their families want some, and then they're like, hey, maybe I've got something pretty good on my hands here, and then they look at scaling. So have fun and be creative with it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I think the last question I have for you is, we're going into 2024 here. What do you have planned for this year, for the future with shows, and you have more? You kind of dropped a few hints that some sauces might be on the horizon.
Sure, yeah. So we'll have our 4 seasonal sauces that we'll do. That'll be in March and June and September and December for next year. We just released our Sons of Speed Scotch sauce, that was back in October, down in Daytona for that. So those are the big ones. We'll have some events. Tennessee Hot Sauce Expo was also at the beginning of November. Hopefully they're going to be back again next year. And so, we'll attend that, and we'll look to probably broaden it out a little bit more. We don't tend to do a lot of live shows, but if the situation fits, we'll do it. And then hopefully we'll get back down to Daytona again in March, during spring break and do another event down there. But we're always looking at trying out new things. Realistically speaking, we'll probably end up rolling one of our normal sauces out, and then we'll roll another one in just to kind of help keep the rotation fresh and keep people guessing and trying new stuff.
Perfect.
So,
well, where's the best place for folks to follow you if they want news updates, things like that?
Sure. So you can always follow us on social media. It's TN Hot Sauce CO. I believe on all the platforms. You can always search for Tennessee Hot Sauce Company. And then the site is tnhotsauceco.com. Is also a good place to go. My wife manages most of the social media because I'm terrible at it.
Me too.
Yeah. So I'll put stuff on there, and she's like, "Why would you ever put this on?" And I go, "I don't know. I mean, I thought it looked good." And she's like, "No, I need the keys to Instagram and all." And I'm like, "That's fine.
That's fine. Yeah,
you can have it.
Run with it. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well,
so she does that. So
perfect. Well, this has been fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming in today. Danny Hudson with Tennessee Hot Sauce Company, and hope to have you back.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Zach.
Appreciate it.
You got it.
Thanks for listening to The Hot Sauce Show. Be sure to follow us here and on socials to stay up to date on future episodes.